A black helicopter thundered over the high school soccer field, whipping dust and gasps into the air. Out stepped a woman in an olive suit and aviator shades, followed by a major from the U.S. military. Students froze. Teachers panicked, and one humiliated girl watched it all unfold. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The morning sun was still melting frost off the fence posts when Emily Carter trudged into Jefferson High, shoulders hunched, the collar of her faded flannel shirt half-turned and stiff from old starch. She smelled faintly of feed grain and smoke from the wood stove. Her jeans, 2 sizes too big and cinched with a belt that had seen 3 siblings before her, brushed loudly as she walked, drawing more attention than she wanted. Her face was pale but smudged with the faint blush of someone who's run too far for too little reward. Room 112 sat on the east end of the school, where the heat always arrived last, and the windows were sealed shut from a storm 5 years back. Students were already seated in clusters, the air electric with whispered gossip and the quiet glow of morning screens. Mrs. Amanda Green stood at the front like a conductor at rest, immaculately tailored, her icy blonde hair swept into a no-nonsense chignon, her blazer crisply lined with ivory piping. Her red ink pen hovered like a blade. As Emily slid into her desk, scuffed, second-hand, and 2 inches too short, she barely had time to open her notebook before Mrs. Green pounced. The teacher's gaze was clinical, amused, and, above all, predatory. "Well, class?" she began, letting the room fall to hush. "It seems our resident milkmaid has finally decided to grace us with her presence. Shall we all moo in unison, or would that disrupt her deep thoughts on livestock?" The room cracked into stifled giggles. Emily stared at her hands, calloused from barn rope, raw at the knuckles. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed shut again. She'd long learned that silence was safer than defense. Words twisted too easily in mouths like Mrs. Green's, but the teacher wasn't finished. "I mean, really, Miss Carter, you're hoping to debate? On a state level?" Mrs. Green clicked her tongue, slow and deliberate. "I do hope they have a category for best anecdote involving corn yield. Otherwise, we may have to, actually use critical thinking." This time, the laughter wasn't muffled. It was open, indulgent, laced with the easy cruelty of teenagers who sense permission. Emily didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead, past the rows of expensive backpacks, manicured nails, tapping TikTok rhythms, and sneakers that cost more than her family's monthly feed bill. But behind her silence, something trembled. Not fear, not shame. Something closer to flint waiting for spark. The barn was colder than usual, a draft sneaking through the warped boards as Emily slid the heavy door shut behind her. The scent of hay, engine grease, and damp earth wrapped around her like armor. Familiar, grounding, unpretentious. She didn't cry. She swung open the gate to the goat pen, checked the latches, and poured out cracked corn with the mechanical calm of someone who'd done this every day since she was 10. Her boots crunched across the packed dirt floor as she made her rounds, pausing only once, briefly, when a tear finally spilled. But she wiped it away with the back of her sleeve before it could leave a streak. The barn was her sanctuary, her confession booth, her war room. An hour later, headlights cut across the field, tires crunching on the gravel driveway. A matte gray Suburban eased into its spot beside the old red pickup, and the door opened with a soft metallic clunk. Sarah Carter stepped out, straight-backed despite the late hour. Her heels, black suede, scuffed from concrete hangers, sank slightly into the soft earth. She was still in her work clothes, charcoal blazer, pressed slacks, aviator lapel pin glinting faintly in the porch light. The crisp folds in her collar stood in sharp contrast to the rustic shadows of the farmhouse. She didn't walk into the house. She went straight for the barn. Emily heard the click of boots before she saw her mother's silhouette appear in the doorway, framed in cold starlight. For a moment, neither said a word. Sarah simply watched her daughter work. Bare hands, stiff shoulders, the silent fury of someone who'd endured one humiliation too many. "Miss Green again?" Sarah finally asked, her voice low, edged like tempered steel. Emily nodded once, jaw tight. "Said I was a milkmaid. Laughed about the debate team." Sarah exhaled through her nose, slow and controlled. She didn't flare up. She didn't curse. She didn't ask if Emily was okay. She already knew. Instead, she stepped further into the barn and placed her briefcase on a bale of hay. The leather caught the light, revealing an embossed insignia, Stratocore Aviation. "She humiliated you in front of everyone?" Sarah asked, eyes steady. Emily shrugged. "Nothing new." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked around the barn, the oil-stained workbench, the plow blades hanging on pegs, the framed photo of Emily's father in uniform next to a rusted socket wrench, and then back at her daughter. "That's enough," she said, her tone final. Not angry, not loud, but ironclad. Then she turned, collected her case, and walked back into the night with a posture that promised something was already in motion. And Emily, for the first time that day, smiled, just a little. The first rhythmic whoop, whoop, whoop sliced through the cool morning air like an approaching storm. At first, the students thought it was thunder, or maybe a tractor backfiring out on Route 6. But the sound didn't fade. It grew sharper, louder, more deliberate. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Phones dropped from fingers. A gust of wind swept across the courtyard, lifting skirts and scattering permission slips like startled birds. Then someone pointed. All heads turned. Beyond the sycamores lining the rear of Jefferson High's cracked athletic field, a black speck emerged and swelled. It wasn't just a helicopter. It was a statement. A sleek tactical Bell 429, its carbon-black hull catching the rising sun with the muted sheen of authority. The emblem on its flank read, Stratocore Aviation, its letters bold and unmistakable against the matte finish. Gasps rippled across the students as the craft hovered over the soccer field, its rotor wash flattening grass and sending the school flag into violent convulsions. Teachers stepped out of classrooms, shielding their eyes. Principal Hargrove, mid-coffee, spilled half his cup on the front steps as the downforce nearly knocked over a flagpole. The helicopter touched down with clinical precision. The earth seemed to exhale. The side hatch opened. First came the boots, black leather, heels clicking like the punctuation of command. Then the figure rose. Sarah Carter, tall and composed, her olive-green suit tailored not for fashion but for presence. Her aviator sunglasses reflected the stunned crowd in perfect symmetry. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. Two aides followed, dressed in charcoal business wear, earpieces tucked behind sharp jawlines. Behind them, striding with a rhythm that matched military cadence, came Major Blake Ramsey, fresh from Fort Houston in full dress uniform. Completing the procession was a gray-haired man in a tweed blazer clutching a leather binder, the chairman of the county school board, unmistakable even without the lapel pin. They moved as a unit, fast and silent, crossing the field with purpose. Students parted instinctively. The air smelled of jet fuel and tension. No one knew what was happening, but everyone felt it. Phones emerged, fingers tapped record. Somewhere a teacher muttered, "That's a Stratocore executive team, what the hell is going on?" But no one answered, because the answer was walking directly toward them, and she wore the kind of silence that made people straighten their backs. Sarah Carter hadn't come to talk. She had come to deliver. Principal Hargrove burst through the front doors like a man fleeing a fire, tie askew, clipboard forgotten in one hand. The force of the wind from the helicopter still hadn't settled. His hair stuck up in places that defied gravity and dignity alike. He jogged clumsily toward the advancing figures, the soles of his loafers squeaking against the waxed floor tiles. Behind him, students clustered near lockers, whispering in hushed amazement, their eyes bouncing from the Bell helicopter on the field to the steel-spined woman striding through their school like she owned every inch of air. Is there an emergency?" Hargrove asked, his voice cracked from panic, throat dry. Sarah Carter paused, cool and unbothered. She slid her sunglasses up into her hair, revealing eyes that were calm, calculating, and unwavering. "No emergency," she said, her voice carrying the exact weight of a formal warning. "Just a message." Without waiting for permission, without so much as a glance at protocol, she turned left down the main hallway, the heels of her boots striking linoleum like a gavel. Her entourage followed in perfect silence, and the air in the corridor shifted. Gravity, even sound, seemed to bend slightly around her. Mrs. Amanda Green stood frozen in the doorway of room 112, her expression unreadable, somewhere between confusion, recognition, and a dawning unease she hadn't felt since grad school. The class behind her was silent, 20 teenagers stacked into plastic chairs, all leaning slightly forward, all now witnessing something they'd never forget. Sarah stopped directly in front of her. "You," she said, not harshly, but with a precision that drew all the oxygen from the room. "Yesterday you mocked my daughter for being late. You mocked her for where she comes from." Green opened her mouth, perhaps to explain, deflect, or deny, but Sarah raised a single finger, and the words withered before they reached daylight. "What you didn't know," Sarah continued, her voice low but firm, "is that while you were selecting your scarf, Emily was in our barn helping manage the agricultural chain that supplies half this town's food, before she even touched her textbooks." She stepped closer, not menacing but immovable. "I run Stratocore Aviation. We design and deliver critical systems to defense bases across the U.S., including this one. That means I work with logistics minds, sharp minds, minds that solve real-world problems in real time, and Emily is sharper than most adults I've interviewed." The class sat spellbound. Sarah turned her gaze to the students now watching from behind their classroom door, her voice rising just enough to reach them all. "Some of the brightest people I've ever hired grew up feeding pigs, fixing fences, and hauling feed before daylight. Never confuse dirt under fingernails with a lack of intelligence." Silence followed. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged for applause. It was the kind that changed how people looked at the world. By lunchtime, the school cafeteria buzzed like a hornet's nest kicked open. No tray clang or soda can pop could drown out the avalanche of whispered replays and dramatic reenactments unfolding at every table. Phones lit up like a synchronized swarm, students passing around images and grainy video clips as if they were fragments of some modern legend. One photo in particular, a frozen frame of Sarah Carter, one boot forward, sunglasses glinting under the fluorescent hallway lights, was already memified, captioned, "She didn't come to parent-teacher. She came for war." Jefferson High's modest social media page, normally reserved for reminders about Spirit Week or junior bake sales, buckled under the weight of traffic. Within hours, the platform's latest post, a hastily written note about unexpected air traffic and a guest from Stratocore Aviation, was hijacked by a flood of student comments. I was there. I swear she looked Green in the eye and turned her into vapor. This was the most satisfying takedown I've ever seen. Emily Carter just became a legend. Even students from rival schools chimed in, begging for footage. Hashtags like #Stratocore Landing and Had Milk Made. No more trended across county-wide feeds. Several students claimed they had filmed the entire confrontation, but most clips were shaky, incomplete, cutting off just as Sarah's voice turned sharp, or Mrs. Green's face drained of color. This only added to the mystique. The fragments left space for the story to grow, to be retold with mythic embellishment in hallways, living rooms, and diner booths across town. By 3 p.m., the story had jumped the digital fence. Local news stations, always hungry for a sensational midday segment, ran headlines that straddled awe and disbelief. Mother of student lands helicopter on school field to address bullying allegations. Stratocore Aviation CEO delivers fiery message at Jefferson High, and even one from the county's more gossipy outlet. High school teacher humiliated after student's parent arrives via helicopter. As the story spread, so did the scrutiny. An emergency meeting was convened by the school board that same afternoon. Complaints, previously dismissed or buried, surfaced with fresh urgency. Parents who had remained silent about Mrs. Green's sharp tongue and sharper favoritism now came forward, emboldened by Sarah's public stand. One father recalled the time his son was told he'd never belong in college if he couldn't spell like a suburbanite. Another mother shared an email Green had sent implying that certain home environments just don't foster excellence. By day's end, the district had issued a terse statement. Mrs. Amanda Green has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into her conduct. The classroom door she once ruled like a fortress now sat closed, blinds drawn. Students passed it in silence, not out of respect, but as if they were afraid to disturb the ghost of authority that had been exercised in one perfect public reckoning. And Emily? She walked the halls without flinching. For the first time, they parted for her. The email arrived with a blue banner and a digital gold seal. Stratocore Youth Innovation Division. Official mentorship offer. Embedded below were details Emily barely needed to read. It was a coveted opportunity. 8 weeks working alongside aerospace engineers, supply chain strategists, and defense specialists. The kind of program most kids in STEM would cut off a finger to attend. Sarah had said nothing when the offer came. She didn't push. She knew her daughter too well. Emily closed the laptop. Out the window, the barn's western roofline still sagged from the storm back in April. A few boards clung to rusted nails, flapping whenever the wind picked up. Granddad had said they'd get to it before the first frost, but Emily knew better. His knees weren't what they used to be, and the ladder leaned more than it stood. That afternoon, she changed into work jeans and pulled on her gloves. The next 2 months passed in the rhythm of nail and hammer, dust and sun. They stripped rotted beams, set fresh ones, and laughed through the splinters and sweat. Every board they placed carried more than wood. It carried memory. Emily learned her grandfather's quiet way of solving problems, the patience in his pauses, the dignity in every calloused grip. She learned how strength wasn't in shouting, but in showing up again and again, even when the work was ugly, even when no one applauded. She turned down Stratocore's offer with a short, polite reply. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'll be spending the summer with my family. Hope to apply again next year." That fall at the state debate finals in Austin, Emily stood under glaring spotlights in a borrowed blazer and second-hand heels. She faced students from polished academies, kids with professional coaches, mock trial medals, and parents who flew in for the weekend from tech campuses and state capitals. She won anyway. Her voice was calm, her reasoning razor-sharp. Her rebuttals didn't just dismantle arguments. They unspooled the assumptions behind them. By the final round, the room no longer saw a girl from a goat farm. They saw precision, presence, and power. When they handed her the championship plaque, she stepped to the mic with the composure of someone who had nothing to prove, but everything to affirm. "Don't let where I come from fool you," she said, her eyes steady on the judges. "Some of the best roots grow from the toughest ground." The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was reverence. Then the crowd rose, first a few, then all. In the back row, Sarah Carter stood too. Her aviator shades were gone. In their place, bare eyes shimmered with quiet, unfiltered pride.